If you could live in the world of any creator's body of work, whether film, TV, literature, music, whose would you visit and where would you want to go?
Not John Carpenter's.
Fair.
It's scary in there.
It is scary.
It's cool, but it's I don't know if I would want to stay there. A lot of them are nightmares. Even the fun ones like Big Trouble in Little China are sort of out of control.
You don't want to live in Hobbs End?
No Hobbs End for me. No Hobbs End. Do you have an answer for that, John?
That's a tough one, man. Because it's not necessarily like your favorite director.
Right.
Like Wes Anderson's movies seem like they'd be cozy to hang out in. If I'm, you know what I mean? Like
yes,
danger is low. And,
yes, danger is low.
Comfort is high.
Comfort, high comfort.
So that's one option. I don't know. Spielberg? A lot of divorce.
Yeah. Where would I want to hang out? I have to admit, I like things that have a little bit of a isolation quality to them. And I don't know, I do like people, but I like, so I don't know why, but I like sort of the tranquility kind of thing. So it would probably be in some Western or something.
That's a good answer.
I don't know, but I've always I love the film The Lusty Men, this Nicholas Ray film. I always wanted to be Robert Mitchum, kind of wandering around in that film, through sort of closed rodeos and tumbleweeds and stuff. That would be one answer, but it would get lonely, I suppose. Maybe John Waters' World. It just seems like it seems like weird but friendly, you know?
Depends on the movie.
Yes. But like fun, weird, but like sort of sweet.
Yeah, I don't think you'd last too long in the Old West.
Maybe I'd do better with the egg lady.
You might do better with Waters.
Yeah, with the egg lady.
Welcome back to Split Picks. We're doing a special October series here. We've been looking at some of the lesser-known works of the great American titans of horror. Last week with Bennett Glace and Jim Hickox, we looked at Tobe Hooper's Life Force and Spontaneous Combustion. This week, we're turning to John Carpenter. So for today's episode, we're welcoming back Steve Collins. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing good. It's I'm up in Connecticut. It's October-y and pumpkin spice season. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the full dose of fall weather today. So yeah, and the building burned down 2 blocks away at work. Weird day, but yeah.
That is weird.
Spooky season and fall hit at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Appropriate for a John Carpenter discussion, though.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was a junk store that burned down too. So yeah. Kind of symbolic. And making his Split Picks debut is actor John Merriman. John, how are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, glad you could both make it, because for longtime readers of the site, you may recognize these two names from Brett's essay about Gretchen, which Steve directed and John starred in. Fantastic movie if you haven't seen it, but we're so excited to have the two of you together here. So thanks for joining us.
We're happy to be here.
Yes.
I am very excited about today's matchup because we're looking at 2 Carpenter films from the 90s. He is in an elite class of filmmakers where when you ask someone to list their top 5 favorite movies he's made, someone's going to be mad about your number 6 because they think that should be number 1. So why don't we go into what you guys both chose today? Steve, do you want to go first since we'll be covering that one first?
Yeah, I chose In the Mouth of Madness because I don't think it gets any love, and it was a bit of a it was a bit of a box office flop, and I think it's actually pretty interesting, and really I think his best movie of the '90s at least, which is not saying a lot, with Memoirs of the Invisible Man in there, and Ghosts of Mars. I guess Ghosts of Mars is after that, but it's not a great decade for him. But I think it's a solid movie, and deserves another look if no one's if people haven't checked it out.
Cannot agree more. It is so fun. John, what are you bringing with us today?
Well, I picked vampires. I mean, it's a little tricky. We were kind of trying to pick ones that are lesser known, and this is one I hadn't seen in several years. I remember it being, having some moments. It's a strange one, but I mean, like I mentioned, it's definitely very unique. I like that he just goes for it on these small budgets and makes these decisions about character and stuff. I mean, you could argue that James Woods is pretty unlikable in this movie, and I'd be hard pressed to defend him. But I find that kind of interesting that he's like that, and it kind of plays nicely with the vampire thing, and it's got some really fun sequences. It's got some cool little gadgets and such, and a few scenes that are really fun.
That's one thing Carpenter is not afraid. He does make horror, but he's not afraid, and he's very bold. He'll really jump and launch into something, and he's not timid as a filmmaker. He's bold, and I like that. And yet he's also very simple. So he has a strange kind of combination of being very bold and making these kind of big leaps, and then being very kind of clean and simple. And that's an unusual combination.
Yeah, one thing that's come up in this series is how, next week we're talking about Wes Craven. So much of his career was marred by studio interference, and John Carpenter, really, of these four, seems to be the one who was best suited for the studio, the modern studio system. I mean, do you guys agree with that?
Well, you would think, but he didn't have a great. I mean, he had Starman, but he didn't have a great time. Big Trouble in Little China. He sort of left working studio and went independent after that, and so he really struggled with the interference of everything, of the studio. So, but he is he's like a big fan of Howard Hawks, and he's like that. He does all sorts of different genres, and he has a kind of, even his general kind of philosophy of life of just like a kind of respect for the working man and the group and the team,
Yes.
is very Hawksian. So you would think he would work in this system, but I think the system that Hawks was in was not the same system of 1970s, 1980s. And he did struggle in it. And he did in Memoirs of the Invisible Man when he went back to the studio. So, but he did have some real big success also. And certainly, at Starman, he was really one of the top directors in the country after that, which is, I guess, why he chose to do such a bizarre movie like Big Trouble in Little China. And I respect him for that, because that's really taken a swing.
Right. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I love that he isn't afraid to kind of just take a stab at something new. It feels like. I mean, vampires. Obviously, there've been vampire movies. Obviously, there've been, other horror movies. But yeah, like Big Trouble in Little China, like there's not really anything like that, It was interesting kind of in prepping for this. I had never seen Prince of Darkness, and I watched that over the weekend, and really saw some parallels with like The Thing, and oddly a little bit with vampires, where it is like this group of kind of working class people. I mean, some of them in that were kind of more academic, but still like, just regular people. They Live has that too, where it's just kind of regular people coming together and kind of taking a stand. And yeah, I mean, it is, there are a lot of it, a lot his films have in common, a lot obviously they don't have in common on first glance. But yeah, I think that you're absolutely right about the kind of common man, working man,
who doesn't take any shit.
Exactly.
And there is something, he's got a certain thing between a very kind of working class thing and then these worlds of like wonder and the unknown and stuff. So you have like this kind of mystic stuff, and then you've got this like really kind of, I mean, it's a kind of hard boiled, but like,
yes,
it's his own version of hard boiled, which is, like a little bit dumb, or like a little bit, I don't mean that in an affectionate way, but like
Right.
a little bit like, a little bit more gruff than, or a little bit more unrefined.
yes,
But boastingly unrefined. They're sort of like some of people. I mean, I'm thinking of what's his name, Jack Burton in Big Trouble. Some of these people are sort of like kind of like lovable dolts, or I find that very endearing. Now, that's not the case with Mouth of Madness. You've got an insurance agent, played by Sam Neill, who's your protagonist. But I sort of see that, in the Mouth of Madness, you've got somebody whose job is to make all the kind of, he's sort of essentially a glorified accountant. He's got to make all the numbers balance and make sure that the insurance claim is done properly and all of that. And so he's kind of a logic guy. And then he's presented with this world of complete illogic. And I don't, especially watching all the work that I did in the last like 3 weeks getting ready for this, you can sort of see that like the John Trent character, the Sam Neill character in Mouth of Madness is kind of like, he's sort of like the audience that resists something like The Thing that goes so batshit crazy, or something like Big Trouble, which goes so batshit crazy. He is sort of a stand-in for that audience that like didn't go to those movies. And then he takes him and he puts him in a movie and he tortures him. and that's, to me, the fun of In the Mouth of Madness, seeing this guy try to make a very unreal world, try to deny its existence, and it just keeps coming back and back and back.
I do think it might be fun to jump into Mouth of Madness by going straight for the weirdness. So, John, you've worked on a podcast that focuses on knockoff films. Mouth of Madness, I'm curious, which character in this world would you most like to see a knockoff film of?
Ooh, that's really interesting. Maybe the my first instinct is to say the kind of child old man biking
on the bike. I was going to say that. Yes. Little man on the bike.
I don't know what it would be, but
yeah, just follow him around.
Follow him around. I think
what's
he just gets
doing?
Older.
Does he got a paper route? What's he doing?
Yeah, what's his deal? He's a working man.
Yeah, that's right.
Probably got a newspaper route.
Yeah, probably's got some one-liners.
Yeah.
Steve, what about you?
He took the best one.
Oh, I've got another one.
Oh, you got one? What do you got?
Charlton Heston.
Yeah. What's Charlton Heston doing? Does he do anything?
I want more Charlton Heston.
Yeah,
as Charlton Heston, or like put him in the world.
Oh yeah, he could go into the world looking for Sam Neill. That'd be good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Omega Man too.
And then yeah.
There we go.
I want to know more about the hotel clerk, the grandma from Happy Gilmore. I love her.
Yes,
she's so
cool. Absolutely. I mean, the film has a great like pace of sort of layering weird upon crazy upon disturbing upon, like, it has a really great pace. And it's something I like about Carpenter is he's got like a very kind of driving rhythm, and he's patient, and he lets it build, and then he lets it really kind of fall on top of it, itself, and you think about that in, I mean, it's like in Halloween, it's like a very slow burn, and then it starts just overlapping and falling on itself, and and you fall into, and I always feel like I'm in good hands when I'm watching things. And I really like the hysteria this thing builds into. Trent goes into that he goes into that Hobbs End world inside this book, and everything just kind of everything starts creeping out into his world, and he's trying to push it back, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming, and you really get into that kind of hysteria. My favorite moment in the film is when he's trying to back up, and his partner, he's trying to back up from that horde of like zombie people coming at him, and his partner, the kind of she's sort of like a 40s Rosalind Russell type. She swallows the car keys, and he just goes nuts, and he's just like, no, he's just like losing it. And Sam Neill's like, he's actually really, he's a really good in this part.
He's great in it. He really is great.
And he's done other, I mean, he goes nuts like this in a couple other movies like Possession, and but
it's tough. I mean, it's a lot to ask of your actor. I mean,
I know
it's like such a,
I know exactly,
crazy
like fade
world.
in insane asylum. Right. You're in a straitjacket. I mean, it's a lot to ask for. Yeah.
So Steve, let's back up for 1 second. We've mentioned this kind of a wild world. Can you briefly introduce us to what's going on in this movie?
So there's a fictional author called Sutter Kane that's made up for the movie that's supposed to be a Stephen King type, and he's gone missing. And John Trent, who is played by Sam Neill, is sent in to try to find out if Sutter Kane is dead, or if maybe there's some hanky-panky and they're filing a false insurance claim or something, the publishers, because they stand to lose, millions if he doesn't return. And so he goes on a hunt with who is it? He's the editor? She's
his editor. Yeah,
she's his editor. She goes on a hunt with the Linda Stiles, I think is the character's name, and they go on a hunt to go find Kane. And Trent sort of, Sam Neill's character sort of rips off all the covers of the Sutter Kane books, and he finds that if you cut them out and sort of arrange them, it makes New Hampshire, a map of New Hampshire, which is kind of funny, but I sort of love it. They find New Hampshire, and there's a red dot, and that's where Hobbs End is, and that's the fictional town in the movie, and they drive to Hobbs End and cross over into the netherworld, and they go in search of Sutter Kane, and turns out he's in a castle typing a book that he's going to try to send back to the real world, and it's going to make everyone insane. When you read this book, it drives you crazy, and so it's a kind of apocalyptic type situation there.
So, Steve, you have an essay that you wrote for us about this film that'll be coming out towards the end of the month. One thing I hadn't thought of that I really appreciate from your essay, why do you think Carpenter had an insurance agent be the star?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it, that I think it actually works really well, the insurance agent character. And I was thinking of other insurance agents in film history, like C.C. Baxter from The Apartment, or Walter Neff from A Double Indemnity. And I thought, that's a good character. Like a insurance agent is like kind of like a private detective, but they don't have like the any of the swagger or the rogue. So like a private detective is like a cool cop, but an insurance agent is like worse than a cop. It's like it's like a real like it's like a bean counter, and it's like a gray flannel suit. Like it's like it's a real square. And I think it works really well because he, like an insurance encounter, wants to be like a cog in the machine, like is happy to be a cog. And it's a good character to then have to go into a creative kind of world, like a creative unknown. And that's kind of what I was writing about, is that, Carpenter uses it as a way to talk about going into an unknown creative world. It's like, which is kind of what you have to do as a, as a if you're a good viewer of art or cinema, you have to be willing to go and leave reality. I mean, that is kind of what we come for. Not that it doesn't have anything to do with reality, but you have to be willing to leave and go. And the insurance adjuster is sort of I think, a perfect character for that. The script's written by Michael DeLuca, who later became head of production at MGM, and I think at this time was running New Line at this time. And he's one of the youngest, I think, sort of studio heads ever. But the guy's like a born sort of storyteller, and they seem to sort of, Carpenter and him seem to share this interest in throwing this gray flannel suit into a real world of madness. So like this character isn't like a lot of the other. He's not like we'll see in Vampires, though that's an unsuccessful version maybe of the kind of lovable rogue that Kurt Russell played
Absolutely.
so many times. He's sort of like an unlovable rogue. But this is really, a little different. This is like really throwing in a square into that world.
But I'll counter by saying he is also, just like a lot of Carpenter characters, he's just a guy doing his job.
Yes.
He doesn't seem to have any particular love for it. It's just like he's just doing his job. He wants to get it done. So, I mean, in that sense, he reminds me of, some of the other Carpenter characters. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think the thing about him being a little bit like a private detective without any of the kind of worldly experience, totally is a great little character trait. He's like an unarmed man, thrown into this hell.
Yes, that's right. He's an office guy out in the field kind of.
I think his skepticism is his most important trait for the film.
Yes.
Carpenter's such a master of mood, and in this movie he throws so much at you, but like you said, Steve, it just kind of compounds as the movie goes on, and then all of a sudden it's like, how did we get to this point? But how do you what do you feel are kind of the keys to how Carpenter builds the mood and the reality here?
Well, he brings you in really slowly. At first, before they get to Hobbs End, he opens, he has Sam Neill's character open the book, and he starts having these fantasies of the book, and he makes the book start coming alive, like on Sam Neill's couch, basically. Sam Neill has this fantasy of seeing a cop sort of beating someone up down an alley, and then suddenly the cop's on his couch. And so it really kind of has a slow build, and then as they travel over there, slowly things start to look. So it's a real kind of slow unfurling. And then when he gets there, there's a kind of screwball plot going on that kind of hooks you into like, oh, what's going on in this world? But it makes you never really can figure out what's going on. It's some plot about like a son that's being kept in the castle or in the church, and then there was disease spreading to the children, and then it's spreading, and the father's trying to get the son out of the thing, but it kind of doesn't matter. Like, it's one of those plots that you understand, it doesn't matter, this is just about scary stuff is happening. And it's very referential to, it's sort of like, this is a movie plot that we're walking into. And it's much more self-referential than any of his other work, really. It's I mean, except maybe for Big Trouble in Little China, but like, which has like 5 movies inside of it happening as well, you know. But you get there and you just can't you can't follow all this going on, and it feels like you've been thrown into the like there's a reel missing in the movie, and you've been thrown into this situation where suddenly all these people are charging this church, and they're going to confront Sutter Kane and tell him to give back this kid, and you're totally disoriented. And I really enjoy this feeling, and I know this film isn't popular with a lot with a lot of people, and I think maybe I just enjoy this feeling of being thrown into something, and something really bizarre just keeps happening. You know, you mentioned they've got like a lovely caretaker, this old woman at the bed and breakfast they're staying in, and you sort of like after they leave, you kind of boom down, and and you see that she's got this naked old man tied up like right at her feet, and she's like, you know, abusing him, her husband, I think it's supposed to be. Like it's you just keep unfurling all this underneath that's happening, and it's got the thinnest little plot explaining it, and I like that about it. I like that they don't try to make it make too much sense, that it's just, no, you're inside a horror plot that you've just been dropped into, and it's sort of, I don't know, it sort of makes you have to confront like, hey, what do you come to the movies for? Are you looking for logic, or are you looking for the kind of ride, the kind of emotional ups and downs you get from a story like this? It's a kind of it's a thumb at the nose of logic, and I kind of like that about it.
And it kind of uses the shorthand of Stephen King, Sutter Kane. The books look like his. A lot of the stuff in the world, you know, the woman works at a hotel. You've got the kids, kind of like Children of the Corn. You know, it kind of uses that shorthand to kind of, you get that like, oh, I'm in this author's world who's written a whole bunch of different stuff, but here it is all kind of existing at once in this almost like Disneyland world or something, right. Where it's like all kind of happening at once.
Yeah, Lovecraft's
and that's really fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. You've got scary dogs over here like Cujo, and you've got scary children like Village of the Damned, and you've got scare or Children of the Corn, and over here you've got some Lovecraftian tentacles coming up, and this
you got
lady's
like the antique shop from like Needful Things, kind of, whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and of course, Hobbs End is like these towns that in Maine that King writes about, and then I really like I'm not like a Lovecraft expert or anything, but I really like this tentacle stuff.
Yeah,
these things, these like monsters just like sprouting up, and I really, these are some good monsters.
So one of my favorite things about this series has been reading some of the reviews from the time when these films came out. My main takeaway is that most critics don't seem to understand the fun part of horror. I mean, it's just some of the things they say about these films are absolutely incredible, and this one was not panned, but it seems to have been mixed reviews at best. I mean, I guess, how do you suggest people approach this film? Because it is not your standard feature. Like, the plot is kind of the least important thing.
I mean, I think if you try to approach it as like, I mean, I notice when it starts, you sort of notice there's a stiffness between styles in him, and you do sort of wonder, wait, is this like bad casting and no chemistry, or is this? And then as it unfolds, of course, she is part of the book, and she sprouts insect wings, and it's like, it doesn't really, this is chemistry, who cares? It's not an actor piece. It's about going into it's about a guy who doesn't want to be inside a creative world, and the world insists, and it grows, and he becomes part of that creative world, and he's stuck as a character in a book. It's about a nightmare about a logical person who doesn't want this world of creativity. But it's not the kind of Carpenter movie where you have a badass Snake Plissken,
Totally.
where you've got this kind of gruff badass that you can get. It doesn't have an easy an alignment for you to participate in, because it's also a little bit, it's slightly critical of the cog in the machine also. I think you have to look at it like, I mean, the way I found it is to look at it like I think of it as like, a movie about what if you were thrown into a piece of art,
Right.
Because art is crazy. It's, I mean, movies are crazy. They're you're riding on these waves of emotion. What if you were thrown inside that, and you were actually inside a movie? They're all little universes of madness. Even if you're talking about like a bicycle thief or something that's, realist, they still are intensely artificial, but that's probably the film professor in me.
Yeah.
It's also kind of one of those crazy movies. I've seen it multiple times, but like if you just flipped on the TV and it was on, you'd be hard pressed to know like at what point in the movie we're in.
Right.
It's one of those ones where it's like, have I been watching this for 15 minutes or for like an hour? It just, there's so much, you jump around from all these different worlds. There's the guy with the axe at the cafe. You got him in the insane asylum. You've got, and stuff happens so quickly that it feels like, even at the beginning, it feels like you've been watching it for like a while. It's very dense with plot. And even when the plot is like you say, kind of inconsequential, it's just, there's so much going on all the time.
The other thing I like about this movie also is having like it has a little kind of critique in it about sort of just like the mindless machine of like publicity.
Right.
The whole movie starts out with like this printing press just like printing out like violently all these copies of this Sutter Kane book. Like it has a kind of a clever little critique of like, I mean, this is great if we're like promoting something's good that's good, but what if we're promoting something that's evil? Like the machine doesn't care what it's promoting. It's just like spitting it out. And I mean, I think it resonates with me as like a movie lover. Like when you're just hammered with all this advertising campaign and then you go to the movie and you're like, this thing is evil, or at least if not evil, just like really inane, which is a kind of evil, I mean, it's sort of like the banality of evil, it's like, it is a kind of evil, like the inanity that is like out there in the theaters sometimes.
So Steve, one thing about your essay is it's part of a series you've done about art on film, and this one you're looking at what happens when it maybe becomes its own world, essentially. Do you want to give us just a little background on this series and how this fits in?
Yeah, I just started getting interested in how filmmakers put different art forms on the screen and make stories about artists from different mediums. And so I found this one a really interesting to write about. I mean, there's so many bad movies about authors because you're just stuck with that damn typewriter. It's one of the hardest things to translate into cinema because it's all inside, and the physical action of doing it is so boring to look at. And so you have to find a way to put it into action, make it come alive. And this is this is a clever solution, which is really to take the reader and make them, in this case, a reader who does not want to read the book, who does not want to have the creative experience of reading the book, but has to for his job, reads the book, and then the book comes alive. He actually travels in a car to the book, not in his mind, in a car, and travels to Hobb's End, and the book comes alive in front of him like a plot. This thing works, to actually give you the experience of falling into someone's creative world. And Carpenter's good at that. And that really is, a lot of his work is about falling into some kind of unknown or creative thing. That's why I keep bringing up Big Trouble in Little China. I just love that movie. You're in this movie, and at some point they're driving that truck, and Wang says, "Take a right," and you go down this alley. And then there's this whole movie going on. There's this whole martial arts mystical thing going on in there that's down the alley to the right. If he had gone left, there's a Western over there. What's over there? And this is another version of that where Trent is going to go to Hobbs End. He's taking a right. He's going into Hobbs End, and he's crossing over into the creative world. And what I like about it as a filmmaker and is that's what you're trying to do no matter what kind of movie you're making. You're trying to get them to cross over and join your world. And filmmakers, we feel very strong about it, and we have a very mixed relationship with when our audience will not do that. When they will not cross over into our world, because we're really trying to get them to come on over and come enjoy, but they want their world the way it is, and they leave. And maybe it's our fault because we're not good at what we do, and maybe it's their fault for being too narrow-minded. So I mean, that's how I see the movie, and why it's sort of a little exciting to me, and maybe worth writing about. Because the movie does, and this isn't just me, the movie gets very self-reflexive. By the end of the movie, John Trent is watching himself in a theater. There's a movie called In the Mouth of Madness, starring John Trent, directed by John Carpenter, and he's watching scenes from the movie in it, and he starts to go mad. So I'm not putting this kind of reflection on this movie as a kind of model for the audience artist relationship. I'm not just throwing this on here, it's in there. It's a very kind of self-reflexive movie.
I like the whole bit with when he's talking to Charlton Heston, trying to get him to stop putting the book out because anyone who reads it's going to go mad, and then somehow it comes up that they're making a movie of it. And then it turns out that's the movie we're watching. So we're kind of part of the movie now. We're going to go mad from watching the movie. I like little fourth wall kind of things like that.
I really like that ending and that sort of reflexive quality of it. And, reflecting on what we want out of art and what we resist also out of art, what we won't go to. As someone who makes things, that's of primary interest to me, why people won't cross over.
I will admit, the first time I watched this, I hated the ending. I loved the movie, but I hated the end. But then the second time I watched it, it was like, this is great. Of course, that's how it has to end.
Yeah.
I don't know what the switch was, but
yeah, I love the ending.
It is sort of the logical conclusion. But I think the movie does work. Like John was saying, the movie works in kind of a lot of generic shorthand. Like even the asylum it's a kind of movie asylum.
Yes, you get it immediately. The writing on the wall thing,
And I think you have to see some more. I think if you just think, oh, this is dumb, you can kind of dismiss it. But there's a self-awareness here. This is a guy who he's sort of built this genre, I mean, at least from the set, so there's a kind of self-awareness here that you have to feel like you're in on him. I think
almost
maybe
like,
to get it.
It's like his last action hero,
Yes.
You're in that kind of movie world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the last thing I wanted to ask about is, I was unaware of this, but apparently Carpenter called In the Mouth of Madness the conclusion to his Apocalypse trilogy, and this includes The Thing and The Prince of Darkness. How do you feel these films are connected? Because I was unaware there was a connection.
I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but I will say in watching this big chunk of John Carpenter, he has that side of him that's like a working man's genre side, like he's a genre director. He's got these working man protagonists with, wisecracks and kind of anti-authority. But he does also have a kind of political aspect to him as well. like these are things, I mean, They Live is the most overt, but like those are also, of course, in things like Escape from New York, where we take all our criminals, throw them into Manhattan and get rid of the bridges. I mean, this is social commentary. I think that is his angle. Like, I think he's very aware of a kind of moral rot in in our society, and I think he's making these commentaries on what the natural extension of that is, whether it's the sort of soulless pushing of art on people through publicity that happens in Mouth of Madness, or the kind of soulless secret campaign of obey, obey, obey that's in They Live. I think that's the thing. His movies actually do have something to say, but we don't often talk about that because they're fun.
Mhm.
And he is this guy from California who's I don't know what his politics are, but I would think somewhere on the liberal side, but with a strong individualist bent. He is not a kind of a follower. He has a very strong respect for the individual you see in his work. But yeah, I think that's where the apocalypse comes. But I'm not an expert, but that's my guess.
Okay.
Just to throw in one idea I had, the first two, The Thing and Prince of Darkness, they're pretty clearly parallel. It's like a group of people kind of coming together against this sort of supernatural or religious force. They're all kind of battling. And then it's kind of inverted in The Mouth of Madness, where instead of like the one supernatural force, it's like a fish out of water thing where everything's been kind of inverted, and he's the normal one in a world where everything else is crazy. It's kind of a fun little exploration, of the other side of it.
He does seem to have an interest in man amok.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I think that would be his through line in those movies, us amok. And that he humbles us with something bigger, the unknown, whether it's the Thing, whether it's the Prince of Darkness, the anti-Jesus, or whether in our case, whether it's an evil book.
All right, I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up. We're going to take a quick little break, and we'll be back to talk about John Carpenter's vampires.
Have you ever seen a vampire? Forget whatever you've seen in the movies. It's not like they're seducing everybody in sight with cheesy Eurotrash accents, all right? They don't turn into bats. Crosses don't work. You want to kill one, you drive a wooden stake right through his heart.
Normally, with this show, we look at kind of different eras of this director. This one's different because it's 1994 and 1998. Not a ton happened between these, so I think we're kind of clear just to jump straight into vampires, unless you guys want to mention anything about the movies in between these.
More flops.
I rewatched Escape from LA. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is kind of fun.
It's very slight, but it almost plays like it's almost like a Naked Gun version of Escape from New York. Not that Escape from New York isn't funny, but it's like it's a riff on it. It's much more of a comedy.
They're having more fun. Yeah, it's not as somber. Yeah, I mean, the 90s were not great for him, like commercially at least. Vampires I think was his biggest moneymaker, which is bizarre.
His only number one film of the 90s.
Probably just the name recognition, vampires. Yeah, I want to go see a movie about vampires.
Yeah.
And The Mouth of Madness, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to go in there.
Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Oh, this is kind of his past his prime period.
Yes.
I'll say in The Mouth of Madness, this is his last great film, personally.
Yeah.
But so this is his 19th film, though, and I did love in the commentary. He said this is my 19th film, my 15th score. So he kind of sees those as one. But this is based on the book Vampires with a $sign for the S. I'm assuming you two have both read it.
Yes, cover to cover.
Excellent. Okay. So, John, you selected this movie, and before we started recording, you admitted this is not your favorite, but
Yes.
I'm so excited to talk about this one because there's so much going on, and I think you're in a similar boat.
Absolutely. It's as I was saying before, it's definitely not my favorite, but it's got a lot of ideas that are fun. It's got a lot of things that feel very Carpenter. Between seeing this and Prince of Darkness recently, and then of course I've seen The Thing a bunch. It's got a very similar kind of the ragtag working man group coming together to take on some like incredible evil, which I like. And I am James Woods is such a fascinating actor to me. I mean, his politics are bizarre, but I like watching him even when he's so unlikable in this movie. He is so unlikable in this movie, but I kind of like that.
No, it's true. It's like this movie has attitude.
Yes.
And it has personality. Despite not being completely successful, it has attitude and it has personality.
And it has a Baldwin brother.
What more do you need?
It has everybody's favorite. Daniel. Baldwin.
So, John, this movie is called Vampires.
Yes.
Do you want to give us a quick rundown on the plot?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a very quick rundown. It's basically James Woods leads this team. I mean, it's almost like Twister. He's got this kind of group of, experts that have their like wacky equipment, and they kind of have an easygoing camaraderie. It starts off in their, on kind of a, not routine, but kind of for them a routine call that goes bad, and a bunch of them get killed. And basically the movie is kind of about, James Woods trying to retrieve this ancient relic that if the vampires get it, then they'll be able to go into the sunlight. So that's sort of the nutshell version of it.
Right. Yes.
You mentioned this movie has attitude. I mean, the first time we see these characters, James Woods is in his leather jacket with binoculars checking out a house, and Daniel Baldwin's on the side of the road peeing. I mean, yes. It wastes no time in establishing the mood of this film.
One thing we hadn't really talked about is just how masculine a lot of his movies are.
Yes.
I mean, you alluded to it, Steve, earlier, but yeah, this one is like, this one's a little off the charts. It's a little, I mean, this feels like
I know, right? Daniel, like Baldwin, literally first time you see him, his wiener's in his hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one of the next times we see him, he's holding a human skull and telling the priest, "Nothing like a little head, eh, Padre?"
There are a lot of dick jokes in
Yes.
Yes, there are.
A lot of dick jokes.
Concerning amount.
Yeah.
Yes, troubling.
But, being Carpenter, he kind of takes the vampire legend, kind of puts his own spin on it, and he, like I think we mentioned, these I love all the little contraptions and things they have. They will shoot a harpoon or something into the vampire and then turn on that's connected to the truck or a winch or something, and it drags them out into the sunlight and they burst into flames. Like, I love all that stuff. It's really,
it has a like a 13-year-old boy quality to it that I think anyone who was a 13-year-old boy, which would include all us,
yes,
it's enjoyable. Anything using a truck, like a Jeep winch, you never get to use one of those in real life, so it's great seeing those. And the fact you can use them to hunt vampires is like, oh wow, it's the best. And I do like the way the vampires burst into flames. That effect is that they're using is, we've all seen a lot of vampires die in the sunlight, and this is a good I don't know how it. To me, it looks like a practical effect, but I'm assuming they're not burning people. So,
well, I watched like the first 20 minutes of the commentary, and I was kind of half paying attention. And Carpenter mentioned like, yeah, some people almost got hurt with this because we set them on fire. So I think there are real
so maybe
flames,
they are
but
burning people.
I'm not sure how they pulled it off.
Yeah,
they're using kind of those little special little packets you can throw into a campfire and it turns the flame all green and everything. Have you ever seen those? You've never seen those?
don't know about this.
We can never mind.
Your Halloween sounds a lot more fun than
that
mine.
out. Yeah, never mind. But the thing I like about his spin is that these vampire hunters are these kind of regular guys, and their job is like plumbing.
Yes,
it's like
yes,
tough, and they've got to hammer it in, and it goes wrong, and it's messy, and there's nothing glamorous about it. It's very difficult, and they've got to cut heads off and bury people, and it's toil, And I enjoyed that about it, watching James Woods just like having to hammer these things in and everything's going wrong. And then he has to go clean up a bunch of bodies and cut all these heads off. And
again, I mean, in a way, it's like Sam Neill. They're just doing their job, They're just trying to get through the day, doing their job. It's like the Ghostbusters without, all of New York watching them. They're just like,
the desert
just
Ghostbusters.
doing the work.
Just doing the work. No glory.
Yeah, no glory, just toil.
A pretty kick-ass motel after party after that first one, though. That's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, it's good, and a good massacre too. That at the hotel is where the what's his name? I don't know. The head vampire comes and takes revenge for them cleaning out the nest and killing all his vampire buddies. And some pretty brutal stuff in there. There is one, I really like that kill that he does where he like sticks his hand in that guy and then like splits him up the middle.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's a nice, good, it's like the movie's just like a little more hardcore than your average classy vampire.
Yes, absolutely.
Movie. And it's enjoyable. I was just gonna say, like, the Carpenter's like this huge Hawks fan, and that's like the Hawks people. They just do their work, they do their job, they're professionals, and they have this code that you don't quite understand. And this movie does that does kind of a wacko version of it, a sort of forced, unsuccessful version of it, where they keep trying. They keep saying like, rule number 5.
Yes.
And then
never bury a team member by yourself or whatever.
Yeah. And they keep, sort of sending up all these rules. And the idea of this sort of strategy of like, that you're kind of trying to teach the audience to be a professional is that they're drawn into that. And that you slowly draw them and teach them how the world of the professional works. And then they feel like they're part of the team. But you like never feel like you're part of this team.
Nor do you really want to be part of the team.
No, you do not want to be. I think in their defense, they might say that they're just being really mean to vampires. But there's like a serious case of like misogyny going on in here. And they would probably say that they don't see gender. They only see that these are vampires, but they've got this hooker that they're carrying around, and they are really, really mean to her.
Yeah, Cheryl Lee, right?
Yes, yeah. Laura Palmer, right?
Laura Palmer.
Yeah, they're really, really, really mean to that prostitute.
Yeah,
and it is unsettling.
Yeah, like, why don't you just get rid of the whore, throw her out of the truck, or it's like, what?
Yes, it's off-putting.
It is off-putting.
They go a bit far.
It is actually this kind of like, if you ever see Hawks' Only Angels Have Wings, there is a kind of like callousness that you see in the men.
Yes.
at first Jean Arthur is coming into that situation, and she's like, why don't you guys cry when your people die? Because the pilots are sort of dying. And eventually she realizes they show their emotion differently, that they do have feelings, that they're not callous. And there really does seem to be an attempt to do that here, that we initially see them as like James Wood as like, well, they have to be, oh
Yeah.
yes, they're very cruel and to these people and to this captive vampire they have, but they have to be that way. But that part never really happens.
Right.
Where you understand why they have to be like that. I mean, I guess you assume, look, they get bitten if they're not really nasty to these. I guess that's what you're supposed to be like. But then, Daniel Baldwin, who's like the meanest to this woman, falls in love with her.
Right.
Like inexplicably.
Yes.
It's really quite odd.
So I have to ask the obvious question. When you think of action movie duos, is James Woods partnered with Daniel Baldwin the first thing on your fantasy team?
Definitely not. Although as I said, I do find James Woods kind of intriguing. I mean, I like he takes a lot of roles where he plays just like an unrepentant dick.
Yeah.
Like a cop like that. I kind of like that about him. I mean, the characters aren't likable, but he has that weird intensity.
And there's an intelligence in him that you sort of key into, and you're intrigued.
Yes, and a kind of an authenticity or like a realness to his attitude or something. But yeah, not not the first two come to mind, but not bad.
I would not rather have Alec Baldwin for this movie. That would not be an improvement, would it?
Hard to say.
If you had any of the other I mean, clearly this is not the most expensive Baldwin.
The affordable Baldwin.
To hire, but I actually think he's fine for this.
Yeah, he kind of has like a Michael Madsen kind of thing.
He has a plumber type quality to him. And it's sort of appropriate for the work he's doing. I mean, he's not, I don't know. I think he's all right for this. Carpenter's never had those. I mean, he's never had those kind of matinee idol type things. He's always had these
Kurt
kind of
Russell's such a pretty face, but he kind of makes him his own thing. I mean, he puts a eye patch on him, or
I'd say Carpenter used him in ways no other directors would have.
Yeah, I mean, his whole career is really Carpenter. I mean, the most interesting stuff, I think, is that, and maybe Death Proof. Which is really a playing off as kind of Pliskin type persona. I was thinking while we were talking about the other one, that his focus on evil, that is one charm of Carpenter, is his simplicity. It's like, no, he keeps it very simple. This is about evil. And so I think he works really well in these kind of genre settings where he can it is pure evil. And that is what we are fighting here.
Yeah, and James Woods is no Kurt Russell, but at the same time you can kind of see this these guys existing in the same world as some of those Kurt Russell ones. I mean, you could see kind of like an Avengers type matchup, or you know what I mean, where each person has their own little movie, but you could see them kind of being from the same world.
From what I read, the budget was like pulled on this movie at the last minute, like they lost 2/3 of their money. And I would be interested to know, like, from an insider, like, what effect does that have?
You're right.
The movie does feel a little oddly paced at times and like kind of patched together. And I do wonder, like, what was lost. Did they lose days of shooting, like they lost script, or did they lose effects budget, or like what, or did they have Alec and then they had to go down to Daniel?
That would explain the hotel scene.
Yes, yeah. What did they lose there?
According to Wikipedia, which who knows, but it says that it was set to be made at a budget of 60 million, was slashed to 20 million at the last minute. And then to accommodate these budgetary concerns, Carpenter wrote his own screenplay, taking elements from the other scripts, the book, and some of his own ideas, alongside writer and frequent collaborator Michael DeLuca.
Oh, there you go. So a total rewrite when he had the budget. There is something, I mean, and this is probably not due to that, but I found there's a lot of weird kind of dissolves in this movie where they do these passages of either him cleaning bodies or or kind of disposing of things. And there's some odd, I find, for somebody who, I like his movies because of the drive they have, I find this one is off for me. Like it sags in the middle, and the beginning's very good, and I do think the end kind of sort of gets some gets some blood pumping by the end, but it doesn't have that kind of great pace. It's got a couple of standout sequences, and it does. I don't know. It's, to me, it's a lesson in just how hard it is to keep everything together when you're a 60-year-old guy or however old he was, making a movie in a system that is slashing his budget. And I mean, it's hard making movies, and I think this is an example of them doing a quick rewrite and it just not quite gelling.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt with more Wikipedia, but
No, please.
Back to the important part.
I thought this was interesting. Apparently, Alec Baldwin was cast to play Montoya, but dropped out and recommended the role to his brother.
That's kind
Really
of
Interesting. I don't know if he dropped out because of the budget or what, but he was supposed to.
Well, that is interesting. I prefer his brother.
Yeah.
Not overall, but in this,
Right.
It's kind of like he's just more ragtag.
So in an interview with Mick Garris, John Carpenter said if he could make any type of movie, it would be a Western. It's like the one thing he's never done these wanted to do. To me, this feels like the closest we have to a Carpenter Western. He described it as The Wild Bunch meets Vlad the Impaler. But how do you feel Carpenter could have adapted to a Western? Because that's something that I could see being great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, oddly, something like Ghosts of Mars or Assault on Precinct 13 also have kind of elements of that genre.
They're both kind of remakes of Rio Bravo.
Yeah.
The Western, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he likes I think he would be good in a kind of setting where there is a kind of flexible moral system,
Yes.
like the Wild West, where you can sort of forge your own kind of frontier morality, because that's what his characters all are. They're nonconformist individualist types, and so you can see why he's drawn to like those westerns. These are westerns are populated by doers, people who are forging things, making things, forging the frontier, and they also are fierce individualists with their own kind of moral code. And that's kind of what he does. And it's a very action-oriented genre. It's about moving and going forward. And his movies are very forward, moving, or they're about being trapped, like a Rio Bravo. So it seems like it would be a good fit for him. He should have tried to make a Western.
I mean, he should have made Cowboys versus Aliens or whatever. If anybody should, he would have been good with some kind of Western with a supernatural element. I was thinking this crew kind of reminded me of like a Hell's Angels or some kind of a biker gang, which also feels kind of westerny in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I would love to have seen him do some kind of Western. I mean, this definitely, I think you're right. I think this definitely is probably the closest it gets to it. It's got the whole kind of revenge thing where the vampires killed his parents or whatever. I mean, that feels kind of that kind of very clear morality of Westerns where, the bad guy, killed people that you love and you have to go face down the guy, in some kind of desolate setting, which a lot of this is.
So one thing I did love about this movie is how the typical vampire rules kind of apply, but not really. Like, they have these giant machine guns and they're just unloading on them. They're like, oh, it's just stunning them. Like, the only way you can kill them is by decapitating them or burning them or stake through the heart.
Yeah.
But they still have these giant ass machine guns. I mean, how do you feel about because they even have like a rule system that kind of like Zombieland, like, oh, these rules just pop up, but you don't see the whole rule set. I mean, how do you feel about how they track down the vampires?
I mean, again, it's a 13-year-old kid thing, like to be able to just have them just firing at these people and not have it be quite as graphic or disturbing, and they're not really getting hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks what I like about it is it just looks exhausting.
Yeah.
And you respect the work ethic. He draws you into the work ethic of, you're burning a lot of calories. I mean, these guys are really hard to kill. I mean, my favorite scene in the end is where where James Woods is trying to kill that guy and he's getting dragged out of the nest. With like on top of the guy trying to pound the stake in, and then the guy is starting to light on fire as he's like, that's like what the movie could have been. Like it finally works up to a kind of hysteria that you can see in some of his great movies, but there's so much, there's so much mucky. Like, is there a plot reason why Daniel Baldwin ties the vampire up nude to the bed? Why does she have to be nude?
I mean, 90s, it probably sold more tickets.
Yes, I guess. It's just there are things in there that he does this to her, and then like it's like 5 minutes later, he's like decided that he's in love with her, and he's like tossing her around and beating her. It's just like it's miscalculated, this thing, and it's too bad because there's something kind of sweet and tender about Daniel Baldwin falling in love with this girl, and I as the sort of weakest Baldwin, I have kind of a underdog affection for this guy, and he lets himself get bit by her, and he's just like a little kindness, and he gets bit. He tries to save her from jumping off the ledge, and she bites him. A little kindness, which I guess is supposed to show us that he should have been very mean to her and been hitting it, but it doesn't really work that way.
I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be like he, has kind of let go of all of his humanity. He's like treating her, he's stripping her nude and stuff, which I don't know. I felt like maybe he was supposed to have been shown to have gone too far, and it's sort of a contrast to James Woods and just showing you how the fine line they have to walk or something. But yeah, it was very muddy. I couldn't quite figure out what
muddy and
what they were trying to say.
And what do you want us to feel about it as your audience?
Exactly,
like I was like, what am I supposed to feel? Like, it just doesn't really come together. But no. I do actually like it a lot better when he's in love with her, and then he lets her finally. She like chomps on his neck, and they're kind of off in their Jeep or something, and he chomps on his neck, and he gives this like. Do you remember that close up of him when he like kind of like crosses his eyes? It's like a real like Naked Gun it's kind of like a kicked in the nuts, but kind of thing. He's like he gives like a kind of like eye cross thing as she's like sucking his blood out.
Right.
It's unintentionally comic.
I gotta say, my favorite Daniel Baldwin part in this is when he's taking care of her and he's like, you need to eat a burger because that'll stop the vampire infection.
Yes, it's not full of wit, this movie.
Definitely not.
I mean, that's the thing. He's got these. Sometimes he has these characters that are kind of lovably average. I mean, and that's Kurt Russell was very good at doing that, like with Jack Burton. But this guy's just average and not lovable. It's unlovably average.
James Woods in this movie, like, if you're thinking about what a real life vampire hunter would look like, it kind of clicked, like, that's what it would be. Like, it wouldn't be Chris Pratt with like a futuristic machine gun. It's like, it's probably James Woods in a leather jacket.
Yeah, in a leather jacket. Yeah, it's very Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yes.
Yes.
It is. I mean, there is a movie. There could have been a movie in here.
Exactly. There's
I
so
think it's
many
a script issue.
interesting elements and things. I think it's a script issue too. And I think them having to rewrite the script at the last minute, if that's indeed what happened, I mean, that definitely explains a lot.
Yes. There is a really good it's in the trailer, that sequence where they rise up out of the earth, all 7 of them, the vampires. That is a visual delight. To see them all kind of come up out of the earth, and it has enough of those kind of moments in it that you kind of stick with it. But it really is. To me, it's the thing it's missing is that rhythm that builds into the hysteria. Like, there's a peak moment in the end where the crossbow fire, like I think it's Daniel Baldwin, fires the crossbow into the cross that James Woods is crucified on, and they're about to burn him, and then like whips it away. It's like tied to his winch, and kind of whips him away, and it just lands like a turd that moment. Like, that should be like a great moment of like a really crazy escape, and it just kind of like just thuds there on the ground. It's kind of missing that momentum and build of action.
Yeah. One thing I do like about it, though, is I like, it's sort of taking the vampire pageantry and all that stuff and throwing it out the window and making them more just kind of like these evil creatures. And in the vampire hunters are just these regular working class guys, kind of like working with the church in some capacity. And I like that all the locations, or a lot of them, are very desolate. I like the whole idea of this, imagining that this world exists kind of right under our noses in these kind of forgotten towns and faraway places, with them just sort of traveling from place to place, across the country. Like, that's a really fun idea. It just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. But it is a fun idea. I do. The connection to the church isn't maybe the best part of that. There's this kind of training that's going on between Woods and the young priest. That's supposed to be like the guy that like brings us into the group as like the novice and everything, but he just seems like kind of frustratingly naive. And James Woods is like unbearably violent to him.
Right.
It's like you're irritated with him, and then James Wood is like too violent with him, and it's like everything is like, it's like you didn't like him, but you did not like him that much. Like, don't like brutalize him. Like,
yes.
It's all just seems kind of miscalculated. I do like Maximilian Schell too, when he becomes the you find out he's the kind of the cardinal who ends up being in with the vampires.
Yes.
He's well cast as a traitor priest, I thought.
Yes.
So this one is kind of similar to Prince of Darkness in the sense that he takes religion and then kind of bends it to his own world. Because, Prince of Darkness is like, okay, well, the Bible didn't really tell us the true story, but that's what was easier to sell. And this one is just like, well, yeah, the Catholic Church created vampires on accident. So they just pretended it was fiction the whole time. And like, here they are, just like this military unit essentially trying to eradicate them from the earth.
Yes.
So how do you feel Carpenter works with religion? Because it is similar to like it's almost a Western, but it's like almost using religion in this. So I don't know if that's phrased well, but
I think it's just like all the nonsense about physics and Prince of Darkness. I think it's just a system that is wrong. It's a system that men made that is wrong, And I think that's as much as I don't think he has anything profound to say about religion, really. I think it's just the man has these systems, whether it's science or whether it's religion or whether it's our politics that organizes, and they're usually wrong.
yeah.
And the individualist has to hold on to their self-reliance and their gut instincts and their inner Snake Plissken, basically. He's not that kind of issue-oriented director where he's like, he doesn't seem to have any grand statement about religion.
Right.
It seems to be he's using it as a means to his ends, which are to give you access to the unknown or dramatize the unknown, or as the organized part that gets it wrong about something, and the we're going to find the real answer. The working people are going to find
Yes.
the real answer. He uses it to his purposes. But I don't know, maybe he hates religion.
It's possible. I think the last important thing about Carpenter as a whole that we haven't really touched is his soundtracks. It still strikes me as odd how many people don't know that he wrote the theme song for Halloween when that is pretty much as famous as the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
He's currently not retired from filmmaking, but he said he's only going to direct a film if it's like something he really wants to do. And he's a touring musician right now. And this one he recorded with Donald Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper from Stax Records and the Blues Brothers. Like, it's just insane some of the people he brings in. But yeah, I mean, his soundtracks are such a huge part of his work. This one is kind of dirty blues, but how do you feel it ties in?
What I like about his soundtracks is just that they're simple. And,
Yeah.
Movie music, you have to be careful about it kind of, getting to, like, prog rock makes bad movie music usually, although there's a great use of Yes in that what's that, Buffalo 66, but as score is usually not the right choice. And I mean, that's the thing about the Halloween it's really simple. And he's really good at simple, and like his focus on evil, his rhythmic drive of his cutting. He has an appreciation for like setting something up very slowly, varying the themes, and then getting it to kind of spin out. And that's in him, as I guess, as a musician as well. I think he would say that it was kind of a utilitarian budget decision. I think I've heard him say that. I hope I'm not lying.
Halloween, he has said that, yeah.
And as a filmmaker, I would love to be able to play music. It's really expensive to get the rights to films or to hire a composer. And so I think a lot of it has been utilitarian. But I did notice, though, that, I think The Thing has, I actually was very shocked. I thought he had done the score to The Thing, but he hired like the premier composer of that time, Ennio Morricone.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and then he had him do a Carpenter score of like, burp, burp, like one note, burp, burp. Like, it's like, why did you hire that guy if you were just going to do one of these things? So it isn't just, his simplicity isn't just because he can't play tricky. It is actually something it's part of his aesthetic. It's not a lack of technical skill. Because look, he hires somebody who can do anything, and he gets them to play bum bum bum. Anyway, I thought the score worked. It's kind of got a sort of heavy blues. It's the score for James Woods in a leather jacket killing vampires. I don't know what to say. It's like
it's kind of everyman, kind of nothing special rock kind of.
It's not too special. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't listen to this at home, but it's appropriate for Daniel Baldwin and James Woods. Like they would maybe go to like House of Blues afterwards or something and have a steak.
It's not what's wrong. It's not what's wrong with this movie.
Yes.
Good way of putting it.
Yeah. It's not the problem.
It's not the problem.
We've really been, I think we've been fair to the movie. I will say I did watch this in the theater, and I remember coming out and being like, all right, good enough.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it gave me enough.
Yes.
And I would still sort of recommend it. Certainly to anyone, a Carpenter fan, I would, certainly a Carpenter scholar.
Yeah.
I would recommend it, but maybe even a fan.
No, I'm with you. I enjoy it. I think it has some fun ideas. It has some wildly miscalculated parts and some really bad jokes. But yeah, I do like the world, and I love the opening. I love that motel scene. I love how they're like rock stars, kind of, just trying to get by and paying off the cop, and I love all that stuff.
So I think that probably covers vampires fairly, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're coming to the end though, so let's make a pick. I think you've kind of both teased it, but does someone want to go first? Vampires versus In the Mouth of Madness. Which one are you taking and why?
Steve?
Mouth of Madness, because it is better.
And that's the end of the episode.
his most complete, and I would say maybe his last. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think it is his last great film. It's his last thing where he really swung.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other ones are really kind of limping along.
Yeah, I agree for mostly the same reasons. It's a lot more In the Mouth of Madness. It's just a lot more originality. Sure, it's riffing on Stephen King, but it goes way beyond that, and it's just got so many fun ideas kind of in it. In the Mouth of Madness, though, by a mile.
I have to agree with both of you, but John, I will admit, this is one that I had not watched, and I honestly probably wouldn't have watched, so I do appreciate you bringing this in, because that's the type of thing the show is about, is standing up for the movies that no one ever does. So I know you didn't pick it, but...
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't pick it, but I do think it's worth watching. I do think it's just kind of an interesting failure and kind of fun to think what might have been. There were 2 sequels to this, by the way, I learned tonight. I
Really?
did not know about that. Yeah. One produced by Carpenter, the other seemingly not related at all. But that's for another podcast. Yeah, John Bon Jovi is the lead in the sequel.
Oh my.
Maybe they're great.
Maybe they're great.
It's a big leap of faith.
Yeah.
All right, well, do you guys have any final thoughts on John Carpenter before we close it out, or?
No, I kind of just wish he had a couple of more good movies in the 90s, and I wish we got a little more out of him, but he gave us a lot.
He did.
He worked very, very hard from like 77 to like 92, or, he like really worked hard, and then it just started petering out, getting harder to make movies, and I'm sure he probably got tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of a sad note to end on. But I wish we had some more.
Me too.
Because when he's good, I really like his style, and he's got real attitude, and I like it.
John, Steve, this has been a blast. Thank you both for joining us and talking about John Carpenter.
Anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're happy to come back.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Split Picks. October Horror is going strong right now. Head over to Split Tooth Media to see everything we've been writing about, and we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.